We're going to go ahead and get started, and again, just keep in mind that we're gonna probably try to move a little bit quicker than we normally would through the next couple of sessions, just because we're times two. All right, you can yeah, just fast forward me, or you can download me for later use. So I want to spend a couple of minutes, though, talking a little bit about course community management. So in the next few minutes, I want to give you a little bit of a sneak peek at what are some of the ways that our instructors on Edx have used tools and different mechanisms to really build engagement in their course. And then later on, tomorrow actually, we'll get a chance to look at some of those tools in action, and you'll get a chance to actually work on building them out yourselves in some of your practice courses. So we'll talk a little bit about what some of the tools are that are available. I'll give you some interesting examples of courses that we like that have used these tools to good effect on Edx as well. So when thinking about communication overall in your course, it really helps to sort of set the tone from the very beginning. And I would encourage you to think about really building a sort of communication strategy, actually, for your course. And this, again, really applies both to people who are building courses that are going to be open and available to the wide world in MOOCs, but also to blended classrooms as well. So really think about the communication that you're going to do with your students as sort of an important aspect of the course, and to plan ahead of time. And then, of course, in all of the communication that you do, keep in mind some of the standard best practices that you've probably learned along the way, being a learner yourself and being a general consumer on the internet yourself. And we'll talk a bit about what some of those are, for example, in email. There's a lot of different ways that you can think about building engagement and interesting content in your course. I just want to show you really quickly an example of a video that we really like, because I think it models sort of an opportunity, and I know Zach is going to speak a little bit after myself about video in particular. But let me just play this video really quickly for you, just to give you a sense of some of the different types of video. And I think a particularly engaging video, but not necessarily high production value, right? So a video that you can build yourself that won't necessarily cost you a lot, but will actually be really interesting for your students.
So let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to read you a puzzle, and it's called That's a Meanie Genie. Feel free to write this. Okay. On an archaeological dig near the highlands of Tibet, Allie discovered an ancient oil lamp. Just for laughs, she rubbed the lamp. She quickly stopped laughing when a huge puff of magenta smoke spouted from the lamp, and an ordinary genie named Murray appeared. Murray, write that down. Murray, looking at the stunned Allie, exclaimed, "Well, what are you staring at? Okay, you found me. You get your 3 wishes, so what will they be?"
So, just as we're watching this, who here thinks that this course team hired a professional designer to design the animations in this video? So, I think what I like about this video is that it shows you that you can actually build content that's relatively engaging. I heard at least a few laughs, so maybe if it was a little earlier in the day, we'd get a few more. But I think it demonstrates to you that it's actually possible to build engaging content sort of on a low budget. And it doesn't take necessarily professional design animations, for example, to create video content that's actually really, still really engaging for your learners. So video is definitely one way to think about building really strong engagement with your learners. And again, Zach will talk more about that later today. A couple of other examples of things that you might think about doing in your courses. Interactive polling. So this is actually an example of a course from Columbia University on the American Civil War. And what they did was actually polled students at sort of the beginning and the end of the course, and use this as a way to measure the impact of the learning that students are having on their perspectives on particular aspects of the Civil War. You could think about doing something like this periodically over time in your course, or even just sort of as a one-time simple exercise. Another really interesting example, interactive maps. So a number of courses on edX have used various mapping tools that allow students to actually pin their location somewhere on the global map and then provide some kind of description. One example that I liked a lot was from I believe University of Toronto, either Toronto or McGill, I'm confusing my Canadian schools, on a course called Food for Thought. And they actually asked students in this MOOC that had, I think, 10 or 20,000 students in it, to pin locations around the world that represented their hometown food and describe what their favorite meal, their hometown meal, was. So it's a really engaging way to actually bring in sort of that global community, particularly if you're building a course that's going to be open and available. And when I say global, right, it might just mean around the neighborhood or around the city or around the country. Even in a country that's small like Israel still has, as we all know, a huge amount of diversity. So how can you think about demonstrating the diversity that exists in your course in a way that's really engaging and interactive for your students? Another example of interactive exercises, this actually comes from a course by the University of Adelaide in Australia, a coding course. Might not look like a coding exercise here, but this was actually a set of projects that were completed by students to essentially use JavaScript to sort of design images. And what they did was built a gallery where students could actually upload their work into this gallery and then upvote their work that they liked most by their peers. So it both served as a way for students to demonstrate mastery, to demonstrate their competency, but also provided this really interesting social learning aspect where they could actually engage and see what others in their courses, other students in the course had done as well. Badges, something that is popular amongst a subset of instructors who work on edX. We don't have a sort of a badging functionality built into the platform natively, but that being said, we've had examples of a few edX courses who have used various other badging frameworks. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience has used badges before, is interested in badges. There's a site called Credly that uses sort of a badging system that a couple of different edX courses have used. It's a way to think about sort of adding a adding a credential to your course that might not necessarily indicate that a student finished the course from beginning to end, but still was able to learn a particular competency or a particular function within the course itself. And just this brings up another topic around thinking about what success looks like and whether or not full completion of a course is really the best way to measure success in your course. And I would encourage you, depending on what type of a course you're going to be building, to really think hard about that, not necessarily, and to really identify the metrics or sort of the success KPIs, the key performance indicators that are going to be most relevant for you to look at the end of the day whether or not you succeeded in what you were trying to do. Study groups and sort of grouping is another thing is another way to build engagement and to build social learning into your courses. A couple of examples here that you see of ways that edX course teams have done this before. On the left, you see something that's called Meetups. There's a site called meetups.com. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, but essentially it allows for people around the world to sort of organically create local communities organized around particular themes or topics. So for example, I might be teaching a course on American history and have students in my course from all around the world. So students in Tel Aviv who are taking my American history course, even though I'm based in Cambridge, the group of students who are taking the course in Tel Aviv independently can actually create a sort of meetup group and get together in a local cafe to talk about my American history course together in person. So it's something that a number of different edX courses have used to create sort of local pockets of community in what would otherwise seem like a really global disparate population. On the right hand, you see an example from actually, I think, one of the most innovative courses that I've seen on edX as far as sort of pushing the limits of what you can do, thinking about building social and social learning into your course. It's called ULab by MIT. I would recommend you check it out if you're interested in social learning. And what they actually built were sort of what they called coaching circles that also allowed for small group activities that were sort of based on really strong interaction between students at smaller grouping levels. The community tab, or something we call the community tab, is a way to actually build in sort of a home page for all things social directly into your course on edX. You may have seen this if you've taken any of a number of edX courses, but essentially what it allows you to do is actually create a page within your course, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to actually do that, I think, tomorrow morning. But it allows you to create a page that you can then sort of feed in the streams that you might have from various social media personalities that you have. So for example, a number of our courses and a number of our institutions that we work with have created Facebook pages or Twitter feeds specifically for their courses or specifically for their institutions. Early on at edX, I know that in some cases, even when the institution or the instructor didn't actually create their own Facebook page or social media account, someone in the class did it for them. So there would be entire Facebook communities that an instructor would sort of happen upon and be like, oh, that's not me. But it turns out that a couple hundred students in the course had gotten together and actually created this sort of social community, totally unbeknownst to the instructors. So if you're doing MOOCs, I would say don't be surprised if things like that happen. And the more you are interested in it, the more I would recommend thinking about how do you actually proactively design opportunities for students to engage in social media communities that they're already existing in outside of your class. For example, if you're teaching a course and there's already a really active community on Facebook or on Twitter or on some other social media network around your topic, I would encourage you to think about how can you actually leverage the power of that community to bring it into your course and add engagement and add value for your learners who are participating from this community that already exists before you had to do anything. Ongoing communication is something that's really important, and I will say, kind of what I mentioned at the beginning is that it's not just sort of the first email you send, but thinking really actively about what are the communication points that you're going to be using throughout the course, and being really communicative, and really, I think, particularly in this setting, being overly communicative is actually really helpful. We find on edX that that students tend to be pretty forgiving of us, as long as we sort of tell them what our expectations are of them, and that you'll find that students are actually really gracious, particularly if you're doing MOOCs that are open and available and free to the world. People really appreciate the work that you're putting in as an instructor to make that opportunity available to them. And so the more you communicate and the more you tell them what's going on and be really clear with them about your expectations and instructions, the easier their lives become and the happier students they become. I know I kind of burned through that really quickly, but just before we move on, maybe time for a question or two if there's anyone who has one. Yeah. Okay.
And as far as I remember, the coaching circles were done on a different website.
They were, yeah.
And my question is, there is also another website that allows for these small groups. So do you have this functionality in edX right now?
Yeah, so a lot of the examples that I actually gave are examples in which you're actually pulling outside technologies into the edX platform. So we don't have functionality that does exactly what ULab does, which is why they went out and sort of used a different technology. We do have some functionality that's built into the platform that we'll explore more in the next day or so that allows you to build in sort of social learning opportunities, things like peer-to-peer assessment, cohorts, but the truth is that there's also a lot out there, and I would encourage you to think about using it. And the nice thing about our platform is that it's fairly easy to bring in technologies that exist elsewhere on the internet and to leverage them in your course. And we've sort of intentionally built a platform in such a way that you can actually do that fairly easily. We're never going to be able to be all things to all people as far as sort of platform functionality. And so there are companies that do this and that's their only product, and they do it really well. And so rather than trying to replicate that and sort of create a second-class version of something like the ULab, the coaching circles functionality, we encourage you to think about how you can use it in your own course. Now, it's always important to think about, as you're designing courses and bringing in outside technology, to make sure you're testing it, to make sure it's something that you trust, and particularly if you're doing a MOOC, to make sure it's something that scales, right? So I don't know if anyone has heard the example of one of the first MOOCs back in, I think, 2013 that tried to use Google Docs for a course of 60,000 people and gave access to a Google Doc to all 60,000 of their students and asked them to go in and co-edit the course, and I think they almost shut down Google for an hour or two. So not all technologies are built for scale, so make sure when you're looking at bringing in outside tools that they're things that are going to work not just for you and for your authors, but if you're building a big course that will work for large numbers of people. Yeah.
A similar question regarding the Teams functionality that we seen earlier.
Yeah.
It was inside the edX, so is that available?
It is available. Yeah, it's still, I would say it's still sort of beta functionality for us. So it's open and available. It's something that's only sort of just been used. The first team that was really kind of testing it as it was immediately after it was built was the McGill course that happened just a few months ago. So I think there's still a lot that we're learning about how to use it well, and there are a lot of improvements that we'd like to make to add functionality that's not there today. But that's an example of a social learning tool that is actually built in natively to the platform, and we'll continue to develop more tools like that over time. Okay, I'm happy to answer questions again over the course of the next couple of days as well.
So I'm very cognizant of time where we may not have been able to start on time, but we're still going to aim to end on time. So hopefully everybody has some fresh coffee going through their veins right now, getting a little bit more pumped up for the last couple sessions. Okay, okay, a little noise from one table. I'll take that. So thanks for that. And actually, one more thing to add on to the final question that Mark was answering is that our platform changes a lot. It's not like old type of delivery models for software where you get a new version comes along every year or every 6 months. We actually release new code weekly now. We're actually going to make that even more frequently soon. We have ways where you can keep up on what the major features are. We're not saying that we're releasing major things each week, but sometimes little incremental improvements to features that we already have. So just wanted to add in that extra piece of detail. So let me then use this time to dive into our media best practices. The first thing, actually, I won't need to spend as much time on this as I originally thought, but just wanted to go over some of the components of our video player and why we are very proud of this at Edx as well, because it incorporates a lot of those learning concepts that Hildy talked about in her first session, especially around universal design, where you are both seeing, you're hearing, and you're also going to be reading at the same time all of the same material that you can click if you haven't tried this before. All these are links that you can click to at various parts in the video. You can go faster if you'd like. You can have closed captioning as well as scrolling captioning on the side. And also, what would be very important for this crowd is that there is the ability to actually change the languages. And so you can have transcripts within multiple languages inside of your course. So the functionality aside, I want to talk a little bit more about actually creating engaging media for your course. So up here is really a list of what a possible media team might look like inside of an organization. And there's lots of different titles here. The main titles that you would normally end up seeing are really going to be around this side. Hopefully you can see my cursor. And another thing to know is that sometimes you're going to have maybe one person doing all of these jobs within a course. And I see a few smiles and nods where there has been that one person, or maybe that has been you at some point. And you know how much work this is. And it's hard sometimes to explain this to instructors inside of a course, because they're used to almost creating courses, if they haven't done too much online, as a very solitary type of exercise. Even if you're using a platform like Moodle or something to help supplement your class, sometimes it's still going to be the professor who's just writing the materials on there. They're doing everything themselves. Once you switch to some of these much larger courses, it might turn into much more of a team exercise at this point. And oftentimes where you're going to be spending a lot of effort, if you want a very video-rich course, is going to be on the media side. This is going to take up probably a good chunk of your time. So here, okay, it's actually fairly readable. I won't go through all of the different elements that we have here for the timeline, especially because the timeline will vary per your course. So what type of production are you doing? We'll actually go through a list of questions like that later, and especially how long your course is. And one thing, actually there's a couple things I'll point out. One is going to be around presenter coaching, which a lot of people don't actually budget in. How many of you have had to watch a recording of yourself before? Can I see a show of hands? And how many of you liked what you saw the first time you saw it? Okay, a lot less hands. That's just going to be the case with a lot of presenters also. It may be a teacher where they could say, I've been lecturing for 30 years. I know how to give a lecture. I can do that. And as soon as you show them a video, they're just going to want to completely redo what they were saying before, or the way that they were presenting before. So you will need to build in some of this time for coaching. So what I'm going to go through is there's going to be a few slides here about both the pre-production process and then also the production process with media. So what we like to break this down in is what are the main questions that you want to ask yourselves at any of these phases. So presentation modes. And what we like to highlight here is that you don't necessarily want to pick the presentation mode before you know who the instructor is going to be. There's going to be some instructors that are very animated on a stage like this, that they love that type of interaction, but it doesn't really match necessarily all the time to a MOOC. Or you may have some presenters who are not animated at all, or maybe they're just not as charismatic, and that's fine. You just need to think about different ways that you're going to produce this course. Maybe it will be more screen capture. Maybe you'll have a lot more images or sort of B-roll, sort of other filming that's happening in the background. And that actually goes towards identifying pre-existing assets. Actually, one of the talks this morning, they were saying how you need to be conscious about what type of materials are already protected under copyright and trying to find some Creative Commons materials. Another thing, and actually the last two bullets kind of go hand in hand, is around the motivation of the instructor. If you have an instructor who is extremely enthusiastic about creating this course, chances are you might be able to get more of their time. You might be able to be more flexible with what they're doing. If you're working with an instructor who was told by their boss, hey, you need to create a course, this probably isn't going to be very high on their priority list. So you need to be able to set expectations right from the beginning about what their time commitment is and when you can get that time. Because if they get invited to a lecture somewhere or to travel for a conference, they will do that travel and they will prioritize that over your filming. So you just need to be prepared for that. Sorry, I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I just want to make sure everybody's prepared for that possibility. I won't go through each of these, but a lot of these have to do with the presentation style and the sort of presentation modes that you're going for. So again, where you're actually filming this will matter. The amount of time that you expect to have a finished video will matter. and also the use of script or a teleprompter will. And for a lot of instructors, teleprompter is actually quite important. Even if an instructor is very used to presenting lectures without any cue cards, any notes at all, sometimes people can freeze up when they're just staring straight into a camera. They don't have any interactions. It's a completely new mode of presentation, and a teleprompter is a great way to be able to get somebody talking. And you don't need to invest a lot of money in this either. There's so many even smartphone apps that you have now that can act as a teleprompter, and there's actually some creative little hooks you can put to the top of cameras. Okay, so once the sort of pre-production work is done, then you also want to think about actually producing this course. And the modality shift, as we call it, is one of the biggest things to consider, where in the type of area where we are right now, it's a very theatric type of presentation. I'm literally on a stage speaking in front of into a microphone to a group of people. It's very much like a theater. Whereas when you're actually creating content for online, for learning, it becomes much more of a cinematic type of production and really a one-on-one. It's no longer like right now where I'm trying to speak to a room full of people. Rather, it's becoming a one-on-one experience with your learner. And again, for a lot of instructors, that's maybe new. They don't know how to present for that type of way. The other thing is just around accessibility. So one thing too, for all of you who have watched videos of yourselves, and I'm sure I would cringe if I watched a video of myself right now using a lot of ums and things like that, you'll need to be cutting those out of the video and do some training. And also if you think about some accessibility where you're saying, as you see here, and you're pointing to a slide, but your learners may not be able to see. So you want to be able to explain what's there. You want to be able to make sure that people from any mode in which they're learning or based off their own capabilities can still interact with this course. Again, why sort of clear audio and transcripts are also important. And Ildi touched on this before around the video segment portion where we like those smaller portions. And actually there was a question when Ildi presented this earlier just talking about, well, a movie is 90 minutes and people stick around for a movie. And really, that's great if you have a film like The Martian or another big blockbuster hit. If you're teaching like Introductions to Statistics Part 2, you're not going to have people that are going to be engaged for that long, no matter how wonderful of a presenter you are. You're not really going through the full story arc. You're not necessarily having this much larger narrative. Rather, you are conveying pieces of information and then testing people on those pieces of information. And that's why those short segments are good. Another thing is to consider your audience. When somebody's doing an online course, it's not like a cinema where they're sitting there, they're watching one screen. This person, and as I'm sure a lot of you have had the temptation to have your laptops open, Facebook is just one new tab away. You can only keep people's attention for relatively short periods of time, and so make sure you create content accordingly. Because filming is expensive. So if you're going to be creating long video segments, but people are only going to be watching the first few minutes of those segments, that's a lot of throwaway money that you've spent. So be very cognizant of this. So we're going to talk about some of the different modes, and I'll show you a few examples of these as we go along. So these are some, I don't think we'll get to all of these type of modes, but actually one thing I'll call out to begin with, because we already saw a little bit of a video before, is in a classroom or in an office. So the video that Mark showed earlier, where they had the little genie example, a few more interesting points about that video is that it was a conversation with a student as well. And so whereas a lot of instructors may have time talking straight into a camera, or they're not too sure how to articulate the ideas, what's interesting, and I've heard this from a lot of video producers before, is that when you talk to them without the camera and you're asking them questions about the topics, they get really animated and they're able to give some of those explanations. And if that's the case, then you can go ahead and move to some sort of interview style, some sort of student asking a question to a professor. The other benefit there is that the student can be modeling the type of behavior that they want. So if you remember back to that video that Mark showed, the student starts out by asking, is it okay if I take notes? And the professor said, yeah, sure, go ahead and take notes. And so even though they're not asking students to explicitly take notes, they're trying to demonstrate this type of behavior through this video. So enough of me talking. I'll let a few other people talk now when we go through some of these examples. So, jumping into one tablet capture one.
Toutes les échelles de temps et d'espace. Il s'organise comme un voyage dans l'univers, depuis notre système solaire jusqu'à l'univers tout entier, en passant par la formation et l'évolution des étoiles et des galaxies.
So I'm not too sure what they said. It was in French. I know at least our videographer speaks French, so he might be able to help us out. But the important part is that they're talking, whatever the concept is they're talking about, it's still visually appealing, where we don't know what the professor looks like, but we can see that they're drawing, they're doing something by hand. It creates something very personal about it. They're creating something. It's like if somebody's drawing you a diagram, you personally, to try and explain a concept. And this can be a relatively low-cost way of doing video as well. There's a number of different tablet capture programs. And we even have part of Edx where there's an extension for PowerPoint in Windows where it's called Microsoft Mix. And you can actually go ahead and you can create videos straight in PowerPoint. And the benefit there is that you can edit the videos also in PowerPoint. So let's say you know that you messed up one of the slides. You messed up slide 4. Instead of re-recording the entire video, you can just go back to slide 4 and re-record that. So that's just one example. Here's the next one of inside of classroom.
People, the young people said, you know, you old guys, you know, you're so pleased you discovered the secret of life. Genes encode proteins. You can't actually read a single gene. It's all theoretical. You've proven it. There's no doubt that that's the case. The DNA encodes the RNA, encodes the proteins. But you haven't read a single gene. Isn't that pathetic?
So this may require a certain sense of humor too with this professor. This is about a biology course. And with this professor, when they were originally talking to him about producing this, and the different modes in which they could actually capture him for this MOOC, he was very insistent, even after being coached against this, to say, I need an audience. I need to be in front of a classroom. I cannot do what I do without a classroom. But if you saw, he was still looking in the camera. He was still having a moment there. So this is a more elaborate technique, but what we actually used in this case was something called Interatron. It sounds kind of funny, but the basic idea is that the teacher, you could still see, was teaching to a full classroom. And for a lot of the lecture, he was still looking at the board, he was drawing on the board, but whenever there was a learning moment, something really impactful, a really big point that they wanted to say, he was looking into the camera. And more importantly than looking in the camera, with this technique, this professor is very insistent that they need some sort of feedback. They need to see if somebody's nodding their head, if they're understanding. And so with this, it's actually projecting a video of, in this case, a production assistant in the other room who's listening to this video, or listening to the lecture and nodding his head and going along with it. And it gave that professor that type of feedback that they needed in order to actually perform to their top potential. Okay, so another one about filming on location.
Well, as a way of avoiding predation. Being part of a large group is one way of avoiding predators such as my lion friend here alongside of me. Primates that occupy particularly vulnerable habitats.
So the point of that video is not to teach you about predation necessarily, but the fact that they went out to this was I believe it's actually an anthropology course from Wellesley College in the US. And what they wanted to teach with it, or when they wanted to teach this, they wanted to go to a zoo. They actually want to show some of the animals that they were talking about. And that's a fairly accessible place to get some permission to go shoot some video in. And what happened in the video is great, that you get these impromptu moments when you're filming on location, like when he's talking about predation and then a lion starts roaring, starts to example some of this behavior that he's talking about. And it's just very difficult to capture that type of moment in the studio. So just a a little bit about on location. Then next, a piece about using still images inside of course.
Finishing off Rosakes, his brother Spithridates raised his hand up in the air with his scimitar to finish off Alexander. And as he was bringing it down, Clytus the Black, Homelas in Greek, swung his sword and cut Spithridates' arm off at the shoulder.
It's a little gruesome, but the main point there is that there's not much footage that you can use to demonstrate Alexander the Great or stories about his time. But there are a number of paintings, images, a lot that are available in the public domain even. And so you can still create movement using a technique called 2.5D in this case. And it's something that, depending on your sort of video editing abilities, it's something you can try out and do yourselves. This one, I won't play the full video, but it gets a little intense. So I'll pause the video there for the sake of time, but this is a very dramatic reenactment of a crime that's happened. And this was created by one of our partners who wanted to do a course about sort of crime scene investigation type of science and what would happen. And they wanted to do this through the use of some sort of narrative, of some sort of story. And unfortunately in the world, there's plenty of those stories that are available, but then getting clearance to maybe use some of those, both in terms of family privacy reasons and also for copyright reasons with large networks, is very difficult. And what they decided to do instead was to recreate some of these materials themselves and to be able to then tailor them for their course. And so the course actually talks about this type of science through the investigation of a crime, a fictional crime that they use. So they're actually trying to use narrative in this particular course. Another interesting thing is that the reason why the team did this is because they couldn't find any materials to use in their own classroom for this type of media. And they knew that other people teaching the same topic would run into the same problem. And so something that we see as an increasing trend within Edx is that they made this available as Creative Commons. So that way, if teachers in the future want to teach a course like this, they can access these videos for free. They can use this in their own classrooms. And you'll see more and more materials on Edx. There'll be little logos at the bottom of the pages where it says that they're Creative Commons if they are. Sorry, just checking time. We should be all right to show another.
For decades, scientists and practitioners in psychology have been doing the best they can to improve people's lives by promoting healthy behavior. And with some success. But clearly we should do better. And we can. The digital revolution has opened new perspectives in that respect. All sorts of digital means and e-tools are now available that can assist you in boosting the promotion of healthy behavior. Healthy behavior for yourself, your friends and family, but also for your community, your work site, or your peers.
So this is an example, obviously, of the use of green screen. And I'm sure for a lot of you who have taken online materials before and seen use of green screen, it's not as dramatic as that. There's actually just a PowerPoint background right behind them. And what they're doing here, so this is a course on e-health by, I believe, Leuven. Mark will correct me. Yeah, I got it right. Okay. by a university called Leuven, where if you noticed when he was talking about sort of the increased access to digital means, and they have screens in the background and somebody with a virtual reality headset on. And when they start to talk about health, you see somebody lighting up a cigarette in the background. And what they're using the green screen for is to reinforce these like using visuals to reinforce some of the elements that the professor is talking about at any given time. Again, a little bit more dynamic than just simply having on a PowerPoint maybe cigarettes pop up when, as a bullet point when he's talking about e-health at that point. So the final video I want to show is actually from a course we've talked about earlier, which is called The Science of Everyday Thinking by the University of Queensland in Australia. And what this video, it's in part to show a different style that they've used in shooting their videos, but it's also them talking about how they decided to make their course. So I'll play that for you a few minutes in this one.
People might notice it's shot in a different location. So we have the lawnmower that starts in the background. We have lorikeets that are flying in the back. And so the idea here is that we have people don't just associate a particular concept with a particular location. So we have the availability heuristic, and they don't just associate that with Danny Kahneman's apartment. They learn it, and they see it in a whole bunch of different contexts, and that's obviously important. There's a bunch of these sort of context effects that we're relying on throughout the course to try to make learning stick, to make these things stick in people's memory for a longer period. But the problem is we have to balance these things with interest.
It's a difficult sort of thing to do, as we said, because we have these desirable difficulties. We have these sort of effortful processes. It's hard. If we did this right, we would make this sort of material very difficult for students to kind of organize and everything else, but that's at a cost. We have tens of thousands of students in this course, and we want to keep them around week to week. It's not like a university course where they have to be there in order to get certified. People are doing this on their own time. They're actually kind of sitting back and watching this almost as entertainment. And if that's the case, you can't make it really effortful for people in the same sense that we can in university. So the way that we're trying to make it interesting is to have really high production value video, to shoot in interesting places. We're interviewing some of the best people on the planet. In a couple of weeks, we have the Mythbusters. That's going to be exciting. And this is hopefully going to keep people interested in the content. We have...
Sorry, that didn't mean to end it there, but the point of this video is, well, a few things. So hopefully you get a little bit better idea. They're actually talking about how and why they decided to film their course in a very particular way. And another piece that's interesting that you would have noticed is that they just used a 2-camera setup. And actually I could give a little bit more background on this course, which is that they actually had quite a big budget to shoot this course. And what they did is they sent 2 professors around the world and 1 producer to go around and interview a lot of experts around sort of cognitive thinking. And they did it mainly on this 2-camera type of setup, as you would have seen, where they were switching different angles there. And most of the time that they did any type of speaking, it was rarely directly into the camera. It was much more in this reality TV show type of format. So there would always be different locations, different types of backgrounds to associate this knowledge with, and always movement happening that they're trying to keep learners engaged. And hopefully what you've seen from this gambit of examples is that there's lots of different ways that you can approach media in your course, and that none of them are necessarily going to be better than the other. It's really going to depend on what your budget is, what your production team is, and also who the professors are going to be. The original one where we didn't even see the professor's face and they were drawing on a screen, that's not necessarily any worse than going around the world. It just depends on what you make with it, how much planning you do with it. I'm only going to spend a moment on this, which is what we call about videos. It's really the trailer for your course. You could think of it like a movie trailer. Especially if you're trying to create courses that you don't have a built-in audience for. When I mean built-in audience, a lot of you are going to be creating sort of class experiences for people that need to take these classes. They don't have a choice, so advertising isn't as big of a problem. But if you're trying to attract a lot of people to your course, one of the best ways you can do that is to create an engaging and very short course trailer to try and grab someone's attention. Think 30 or 40 seconds, sometimes even less, just to convey the key learning points in the course. some good imagery, and to tell people how to sign up. And we've seen this go very wrong, and we've corrected it before, and there's actually noticeable results in terms of enrollment. So, sorry, I'm not being too precise with the data, but it's just to say at this point, spend a lot of time thinking about this if you're trying to really maximize enrollment for your course. Another thing to consider is mobile. So when the IsraelX national platform goes live, it's still going to be a bit of a delay until there's mobile, but for those of you that might be putting courses on edx.org, there will be a mobile version ready. And the important part here is that this screen is going to be a lot smaller than a lot of your laptop screens that you may have. And so there's some important things to note there. One is around text size, making sure that any graphics you're presenting are going to be big enough and sort of in a clear and thick enough font. That's even going to be true for a lot of graphs. If any of you have compressed down video before to very small sizes, if you have graphs with, let's say, thin lines in it, or even when I was talking about text, if you have text with thin lines, sometimes they'll break apart. You can't even see what it's saying or trying to represent anymore. So being cognizant of that, making it very bold text, thick lines with graphs, anything like that for when it gets compressed down. Then finally, and in the next presentation, we'll go through that a little bit more, which is to say, use data when you're looking at your videos. How can you actually make these videos better, and how will they perform? So I won't go too much into this graph. It's a little bit hard to see, and we'll go into another example later, but there's a little spike in this course about midway through this video, and that was getting lots of replays, and that we could see that from our analytics. And what was interesting with this one is actually the professor told a joke at this point. And some people may have been watching at 2 times speed or not paying full attention. They just heard laughs afterwards. So we saw that as a big rewind point where people would go back. And so that's just interesting to know when you're creating these videos then. And I'll show one more example in a minute. So the key takeaways is that this is a new media style. Actually, I didn't touch as much on this before, but there's an example that I like to give, which is that when television first came out, when the first television programs were being presented, they were a lot like radio shows. You would see people sitting around in seats just kind of talking to each other or telling a story. They weren't using the visual part of this medium at all. When you're trying to teach online, you're teaching in a new mode. You need to think about what this new medium is that you're trying to present to and adjust the way that you present that material accordingly. And that goes back to thinking instead of lecture style, one-on-one, keeping eye contact with the camera. I'm sorry to anybody who needs to watch the recording of this later. We didn't do that at all throughout this. And one of the most important things actually is that your video is only as good as your audio. If you mess up the audio, it doesn't matter how pretty your video is. So there's a reason why the media team here keeps yelling microphone every time everybody speaks up, is because if you're watching the video later, it's going to mean nothing to the people watching the video of whatever anybody said. They lost whatever that piece of information, that learning moment was. So be very careful with your video. Make sure to watch little test segments before you shoot too much. I hear some laughs of your own. Oh yeah, got some agreement at least from one person in the crowd. And of course, similar to blended learning before, if you guys want to write this down, we're going to share out the slides as well, or you can search for it on edX. We probably wouldn't be a very good MOOC platform if we couldn't make some sort of e-learning ourselves or MOOC learning ourselves. And we have some courses. In this case, there's another one on video presentation. You'll actually notice if you just search for edX in our search bar, and if you go to that as a school, that we have a whole learning series about there's creating videos, blended learning, using Studio. Just to say there's still a lot of these materials available for you. Cool. So that's it for this presentation. Thanks. Thanks. And for the sake of time and making sure we end on time, I'll present this. One thing to note is that at the end of this presentation, we're still all going to be around, myself, Mark, and Ildi, to help answer any additional questions you have. I know some of you will need to get running, so we can do that maybe without the microphone too, but we will be available. We love talking about this stuff. I know it's been a very long day for everybody, so thanks for bearing with us for the end, and if you still have more questions, we'll make sure to address those then. So the last thing we want to talk about was running your course. And actually, before I dive too much into this, I just want to give a recap of what we've been through the day, which is where we started out, well, at the beginning of the day, where it's talking a lot about, okay, what is actually IsraelX and this new platform being presented through the National Digital Bureau and the Council of Higher Education. And then a little bit more about Edx itself. And then really what we've done is we've been trying to dive into what is the experience from an instructor experience. So not necessarily somebody building the course, we're going to cover that tomorrow, but really as an instructor, what are the type of things that you'd want to look out for? And the final part that we want to cover there is just some elements about running your course and trying to do that in a optimal way. So for this, sorry, I'm skipping through some of these slides quickly because I'll show you a little bit of demo. Within the LMS, the learning management system, when you are an instructor for a course, you actually have a number of options where you can make little adjustments throughout the course. Note that this isn't Studio. These aren't content adjustments, but rather other things that you can edit. This includes making sure to enroll more people in the course. If you had a list of email addresses of people you want to manually enroll, you can do that through the course. You can manage individual student grades if a student has a complaint, if their grade's wrong, or if you need to inspect how they were doing on an assignment, you can do that as well. There's a number of different pieces of data you can download, such as grade reports. And then as part of the edx.org platform, we'll need to see how the Israel national platform will work. You can modify what the certificates look like. So I'm going to go into that real quick, just to show what this looks like at a high level. So for instance, and I won't go into all of this, but if we wanted to add people into this class, we could just say, student at example.com. And if we had a, let's say, Excel file or a CSV file with all these addresses, it's as simple as copy and pasting in here and then enrolling those learners into your class. That's a fairly basic use case, but just to see some of the information that we have here. Lastly, actually the last thing I'll go over on this side is really around data downloads. A lot of this has to do with student information. So a lot of this is going to be very important when you're running your course itself. So you can see, you can get a CSV file, so essentially so you can use in Excel what students responded to on particular problems, or what students earn certificates, or how are your students in general doing in a class. Sorry, this isn't the most engaging stuff, but it's the nuts and bolts that you would expect and hope for when you're going to be running a class, especially for a blended class experience. And just to say that that information is mainly available inside of this instructor dashboard. Then I promise this is the final topic of the day. Hopefully I haven't been talking too quickly, but promised you that we'd end on time, is around Edx Insights. And this is something that we have alluded to before, which is our analytics platform within Edx. So what this means is that for each course that's running, you can get some key information for that course as an instructor without necessarily having to troll through either very large data sets for what I was talking about earlier in the day. You get all of the clicks that everybody had, and without necessarily using Excel files. And what we do is we break this down into 3 main categories. We're actually going to be adding another layer soon, which will be student level analytics, so you can see how individual students are doing. But for right now, looking at an entire course level, you can look at things like who are your students, how are they actually doing, or are they engaging with the course, and then actually performance is more around how are they doing in this course. And we have, actually this is a bit too zoomed in, I'll go out. So we've been, I want to say, picking on this course, or maybe just using it as an example a lot, which is from UC Berkeley's Science of Happiness course. And from what I was talking about with videos before, this is an example where you can drill down into a specific video and see how people are engaging with this video. So in this case, around 80% of people completed this video, and it's a pretty popular course, so you can actually see the numbers of people who have engaged with this. And again, if you're ever wondering about what the return on investment is for your videos or any particular ones, this is where you can pay more attention to that. The other thing too is where I was talking about these spikes. And what those are looking at is the number of replays at any given time. And so right here, for instance, we see a little spike around 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And so what you can do is you can preview the video right above, and if you were ever wondering, okay, why are students replaying this particular part of video? So we can play that and we can see right there.
And again, a line of thinking that traces back 2,500 years. I really love this quote. One of the leaders of Tibetan Buddhism, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, where he writes, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And if you want to be happy, practice compassion. So again,
so what you could see there is, okay, well, people are going back to 225 because we were showing that quote up there, and I'm guessing a lot of people then couldn't actually read it fast enough for themselves, so that's why they're going back. So you could imagine in the second iteration of this course, if they pick up on that, they can know if they wanted to edit any of those videos again to show that quote up there for a longer period of time, which would save students from having to either replay the course or that part of the video, or perhaps some students got discouraged and left the video altogether. So a small example, but that's where you can look and you can make little micro adjustments to your videos. And it gives full breakdowns, and if you wanted to download the data, you can still do that. Another example is where you can actually see the geographic distribution. This is more if you're running a worldwide course rather than one specifically for Israel. But in this case, we can see that actually there's not a great showing from Israel in this particular course. I guess only 181 people are more concerned about the science of becoming happier in Israel. Maybe we can change that after this training. We'll see if it goes up. Whereas in the United States, there's around 15,000. Obviously, there's a population difference, but it's kind of cool to see. Well, everyone's already happy here. Oh, you don't believe you can? Well, take the course. You can see if it changes. And it's just interesting seeing that around the world. And I could go on about this for a while longer. The last thing I wanted to show was around problem sets. And what you can do is see at entire sections of grading, you can see how students were doing. What you see in this curve is not very unusual, which is that the questions at the very beginning of the course, you got a lot more answers for than the questions at the end of the course, just because engagement has dropped off over time. But what you can do is even dig into those questions. So if you want to look into a particular problem set, we'll see if the internet will cooperate with me or not. Maybe I lost connection. No. Sorry, isn't clicking in. But essentially what you can do is dive into individual problem sets, and from there you can see how many students were getting the right or wrong answer. But more importantly than that, you can see what the you can actually see a histogram to see how many students are selecting which wrong answers. And from that, you might be able to know, okay, if students are really thinking that the answer is B, I think I know why they're getting that wrong. And maybe you can go through in the next version of the course, or even while the course is live, and try and add in a little bit more explanation about why B is the wrong answer, and instead they should be choosing C. So you can see this type of information in real time. So this is, I will make sure to cut myself off because I get personally very excited about this, but this is an awesome tool, I think. And if you're an instructor and if you're not using this tool once you get going with your courses, I think that you'll really be missing out, because you can see how all of your great work is being used and how you can continuously make that better. So let me go back to this. So the last slide, and of course we made one that's very difficult to read, so everyone has to squint and pay attention towards the end, is just talking about some of the the different places where you can get data, because there's actually 3 places. There's Insights, which I showed you, the instructor dashboard, where I showed you some of that information, and then finally what I talked about at the beginning of the day, where there's information from a data package download. And really what that is again, we call it the clickstream data. That's everything that somebody's clicked. This is mainly used by education researchers. You do need some more advanced statistical analysis software in order to get that data and probably be able to interpret it in a meaningful way, but we do have that there. One final note with data is that it's great to look at data after a course is finished, but really, if you're going to be doing any sort of content experiment, you should be thinking about that before the course even starts. You should know what the different hypotheses are that you want to test at the end of the course, and make sure that you can build in clear points throughout the course that actually test your hypotheses along the way. So something very important that people think of only afterwards when they say, well, how did my course did? I wonder if X worked instead of Y. And if you didn't design for that ahead of time, then you may have missed an opportunity there. So something to think about. Cool. So the last thing, I know quite a few of you are probably going to be dropping out after today, and I do thank everybody to make any of this time commitment for an entire long day. But for those of you who won't be able to make it tomorrow, I just want to say that when we're going to be going over some of that hands-on information, that you can still find a lot of that on edX. So I mentioned before where we have a learning series, we have a course about how to use Studio. And we also have extremely extensive documentation. So if you remember one of the scary slides I showed in my first presentation today with 42 different assessment types, each one of those assessment types has step-by-step documentation on how to create them. That's available at docs.edx.org. Sorry, I should write that on there, but DOCS. I see lots of pens, so I definitely should have wrote it, but we'll make sure it goes out in any extra emails. docs.edx.org. And there'll be something there to say how to use a course in Studio. Now, I'm not saying that to discourage people from coming tomorrow. I highly encourage people to come tomorrow because we're going to be covering a lot more about how to click buttons in a course. We're going to be talking more about how you can best use Studio to create your individual courses and going over course design in some more detail. So still want to strongly encourage people to come there. And then finally, I will wrap it up just because it's been a very long day, and I will leave any of the question and answer if you would like to find myself. Mark seems towards the back, and I lost Ildi, but, or Ildi, and we'd be happy to answer any questions about edX, the platform, anything that we can answer for. So again, thank you for sticking around with us for almost 8-9 hours now. So, thanks.